It all comes down to this for the New York Rangers. After a plethora of changes heading into next season, this one thing in particular changes everything for this Rangers team, and an insider has revealed exactly what that is. We're going to break it down in this episode of Rangers Digest, but before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 77% of you who watch these videos on the regular are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the New York Rangers as we creep closer to the regular season starting just 2 months away at this point, be sure to go down below, hit that subscribe button, because this is the place to be for all your daily New York Rangers content. But Bret, let's get right into it. A bunch of new reports, and obviously there's been a lot of changes this offseason and heading into next year, whether it's new players, whether it's an entirely new coaching staff, which I feel like a lot of people are making a big deal about, to be honest, heading into the new year. But one thing I wanted to start with is Mike Sullivan and how he will be able to work with certain players. And I feel like that is going to be certainly a huge dynamic and a shift in dynamic from last year, and what he's going to be able to do with some of the veteran players on this team and some of the younger players, because there's a little bit of a weird dynamic in that way going on heading into next year. Some guys have been shipped out, like Chris Kreider, Jacob Trouba, right? And you still have a bunch of young guys coming up through the system. So obviously Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh, and this is from Forever Blue Shirts. Go check out the whole article. But obviously Mike Sullivan had his guys in Pittsburgh. He had his Evgeny Malkins, his Chris Letang's, his Sidney Crosby, that veteran presence. But he also had some younger guys that came through the system, like Jake Gensel and a bunch of others, a plethora of players. And I do wonder that with this team now, he's going to try and create a culture. And we've been talking about it a little bit. You brought it up in a video recently as well, creating a different culture heading into next year, and not just next year, but for the future of this organization. And I think he's going to be able to do that with some of the top guys, obviously relying on your goaltending, Adam Fox. We know, a bunch of these guys. I would argue even JT Miller, who isn't named here, but as well as an identity line that they finally have in the fourth line, Matt Rempe, Sam Carrick, Adam Edstrom, for example. So what do you make of that? I feel like this is going to be a big storyline heading into this season. And honestly, if he's able to get this type of stuff under control and have a good relationship with his players, I think the Rangers will find success and make the playoffs. But if they don't, it's going to be an absolute disaster. So I feel like I do remain optimistic. I think it's going to go the way of positivity, of course, but I feel like this is going to be a big thing heading into next season.
Yeah, it's been a busy offseason for the Blue Shirts, Darius. We've seen a plethora of moves like you spoke about in the open. We saw the Rangers bring in a star defenseman in Vladislav Gavrikov, but I've said here on the channel that I believe the Rangers' biggest acquisition this offseason actually came off the ice. And you mentioned it was, they hired an entirely new coaching staff, but the guy that's going to be in charge is Mike Sullivan. And I truly believe that's the biggest addition for this New York Rangers team, just because of the fact of what we saw transpire this past season. And you saw right there in that article from Forever Blue Shirts, when you have a prime Sidney Crosby, it's not that hard to win. And when you have Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang, but let's not forget, Mike Sullivan's not coming to the Philadelphia Flyers or the Buffalo, the Buffalo Sabres or the Boston Bruins. He's coming to the New York Rangers, a team that may not have Crosby, Malkin, and Letang in their prime, but they do have Artemi Panarin, who is still putting up elite production. They still have Adam Fox, who is still an elite defenseman, a player like JT Miller, who's going to play a north to south style of hockey like no other. And let's not forget Igor Shesterkin, an all-world goaltender. And I've said it here on the channel that the Rangers go as Shesty goes, but I always compare the goaltending position to the quarterback position in the NFL, because you can have a Tom Brady, you can have a Patrick Mahomes, but if the people protecting them, the offensive line and the weapons, the wide receivers, the running backs, aren't playing up to their level, the quarterback won't look as good. The quarterback is not going to be able to succeed. So if you look at Igor Shesterkin, he's got the talent, but the Rangers need to fortify that defensive presence in front of him, which I believe Mike Sullivan will, and they need to get back to their bread and butter when it comes to their special teams, their power play success, and their penalty kill success.
Absolutely. The penalty kill has to be better. It wasn't that bad, I guess, to a degree, but it has to be better this year. Power play's got to be a lot better. And I like that analogy a lot. I think that Shesterkin at times looked great last year, but yet still got got shelled and the Rangers lost the game because defense was so horrible. And speaking of defense, and not just the defensemen, but playing defense and team defense. And one guy that you didn't mention there, and one guy that I think has to have a huge season this year, has to have a bounce back, is Mika Zibanejad. He has to have a better year. And I wonder what Mike Sullivan is going to be able to do for Mika Zibanejad, because make no mistake about it, we had a video last week covering this. They're keeping Mika Zibanejad. He's not going to get traded, at least this offseason. They're going to try and work with him. And I thought this was interesting from the hockey writers, and Nicholas wrote an article here about how he believes that Mika Zibanejad's best days are behind him. And while that probably actually could be true, because he is, creeping up to his mid-30s at this point, you're just not the same athlete that you are at 33 that you are at like 25. But I think that if you put him on the wing, there is something to be salvaged there. And we saw it last season, the second half of last season. If he's playing with JT Miller and he's playing on the wing, there is still something there. I think if he's playing center, it's going to be an absolute disaster, because he's going to be relied upon to play on the defensive end of the puck way more than you would be if you're a winger. I think playing as a winger is probably the easiest position in hockey. So if he's playing center, he's going to have a bad time, because we saw it last year. He cannot do it. He cannot play center for this New York Rangers team. And again, there's a lot of people talking about Mika Zibanejad. Remy Mastry had an article 5 days ago about it's a make or break season for Mika Zibanejad. It really is, because everyone else is gone, right? That was kind of his age. Chris Kreider, Jacob Trouba. Like, if he doesn't perform this year, it's not even just a conversation next summer. He might actually get traded. They might, pull the trigger. And we know that Chris Drury loves to get creative with these types of contracts that have no movement clauses. But again, Mika Zibanejad, Remy Mastry goes on to say, and I feel like a lot of people are agreeing with it now, he can't play center. If he plays center, it's going to go poorly, and then things are going to fall apart. So, Bret, what do you make of that? Is it a make or break season for Mika Zibanejad? I feel like he has to have a monster season, whatever that looks like, right? Obviously, it's not Panarin numbers, but he has to have a great season, and I think that it's got to be on the wing of JT Miller.
Yeah, not only is it a make or break season for Mika Zibanejad, but he's going to make or break the Rangers, quite frankly. They need Mika Zibanejad to get back to peak form. I'm not going to sit here and say he needs to be the player that he was in 22, 23, scoring over 90 points, having the best year of his life. But the Rangers need to get back to, a similar style of production. We've seen him decrease here over the last few years, went from over 90 points to the 70s. Now he's in the 60s. You see that minus 22, just staggering. And during that 22-23 season, he was a plus 25. Let's not forget that when David Quinn, who is now back on the Rangers coaching staff with Mike Sullivan, when David Quinn was here, Mika Zibanejad had his best goal scoring season of his life, scoring over 40 goals. Let's also not forget that when David Quinn was here, the Rangers may not have had the, most success. They weren't very successful during his tenure, but they were still a top 5 power play team every single year under David Quinn. And we saw that translate to the Pittsburgh Penguins bench when he was with Mike Sullivan last year. He took a Penguins team that was 30th on the power play to 6th in the entire NHL. So you saw the type of effect David Quinn could have on the power play. And you make a great point. Moving Mika back to right wing with JT Miller is obviously a recipe for success. They don't need Mika to be a center at this point. They've got some good depth up the middle. I believe it's their strongest position on the team in terms of skaters. But what I believe the Rangers need to do is utilize Mika Zibanejad better on the power play, because ever since he joined the Rangers, he's been one of the league's best power play scorers, obviously playing that left circle spot known as Ovechkin's office. Obviously, that's where, he would score so many goals on the power play. And Mika Zibanejad has an elite one-timer. We've seen it. We've seen those cross-ice passes from the bread man, and we've seen Zibanejad execute, but it's becoming too redundant at this point, Darius. Teams are game planning for this better. They understand that's what the Rangers want to do offensively on the power play. So it's on Mike Sullivan, it's on David Quinn, even though he won't be controlling the power play entirely. It's on those two individuals to utilize Mika better on the power play, get him more shot opportunities, move him around the bumper spot. Don't just stick him on the left circle and standing there the entire 2 minutes. You got to find a way to get Mika more involved, get him more shot opportunities, more volume. That way he's more engaged. And I believe the Rangers, with Mika, executing, at a high level on the power play, it will give him more confidence, and he will be also better at even strength.
Absolutely. And I think that, like you brought up, he's played a lot of time on the power play in Ovi's office. Let's make no mistake about it. At this point, Hall of Famer, best goal scorer of all time. That's his office. But Mika Zibanejad was a tenant in that office for quite a while. But I do wonder if they move him around now. Like, try something else. Like you brought up, just try something a little bit more creative to get him going. And then, you don't have to move him away from that spot all the time, but just to get him going. And they didn't shy away from the fact that they brought David Quinn back for a reason. It's to get Mika Zibanejad going. That's the whole reason that he's back as an assistant coach of the New York Rangers. They made that pretty clear when they hired him. So I think that's going to be interesting to watch. And one other thing that I think is going to be interesting to watch this season is how Mike Sullivan works with some of the younger players. Because let's make no mistake about it, I've said it on the channel ad nauseum at this point, Peter Laviolette is not a coach for young players. Peter Laviolette is a coach for a veteran team that's trying to win a Stanley Cup. And that's what the Rangers thought they were. And obviously, I think everyone thought that they, had a chance to do that, of course. But where they are right now in terms of player personnel, maybe not the same, right? So obviously, you make the move to bring in Mike Sullivan. What do you think he's going to be able to do with some of the younger players? Because I saw what he did with some younger players in Pittsburgh when you still had some veterans there, like Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and again, you can name a bunch of them, even Marc-Andre Fleury years ago, right? You had a bunch of veterans, but he still was able to utilize and develop younger players, and I feel like that's going to be a big thing heading into this year as well, with not just Brendan Othmann, as you can see here, Gabe Perreault, but I think that, like Phil Kosher says here, Brett Berard has a real chance to not only make the team out of camp, but be a really, really good player under Mike Sullivan's system.
Yeah, Sullivan brings stability. That's really it. Sullivan, I believe, especially it starts on the defensive end when it comes to these young players. When these young players transition into the NHL, you're not expecting them to take the top off and, score 50 goals or anything like that. You need to start somewhere. It starts on the defensive end and then it leaks out into the O zone. So you need, that stability and that structure. That's what Sullivan is going to bring. And you look at Brett Berard, you look at Brendan Othmann in particular, these are two aggressive forechecking type players, which Mike Sullivan absolutely loves. So that will get, a check mark for them in Mike Sullivan's book. He'll be happy about that. When it comes to Gabe Perreault, I don't expect to see him right away at the NHL level. This is a guy that still hasn't even played a minute in the AHL, so I'd like to see him develop a bit more. Play with the Wolfpack. When he's ready to come up, they'll bring him up in due time. But it's going to be focused on Othmann and Berard. Those are going to be the two players dueling it out for what I believe is that third left wing position. I believe Brett Berard will ultimately win out just because of the production that we've already seen from Berard, even dealing with that shoulder injury that was an ailment for him during his entire tenure as a Ranger. Didn't play in many games, but when he played, he was banged up and he still was pretty productive. So I'm excited to see what a fully healthy season from Brett Berard, what that looks like. But Othmann is certainly going to be a factor. We will certainly see him on the Rangers this season. But one player in particular that I believe Mike Sullivan will have a great influence on is Alexei Lafreniere, because you mentioned it. You brought up Jake Gensel a little while ago, and I always compare these two players. Not that they have a similar style of offensive game, not that they score the same way. Lafreniere is a little more finesse, likes to work in those tight spots. Gensel's got that quick release, a really nice shot. But what they both have in common, obviously the fact they play the wing position, they have a similar stature. They're both left wings. I know the Rangers transitioned Lafreniere into the right wing, which I didn't think was, the best move, to put him in the best position to succeed. But nevertheless, that's the position he's playing right now. But Sullivan has to utilize Lafreniere on the power play. He has to do it. Jake Gensel is a lead on the power play. I believe that Lafreniere, if you put him on the man advantage, he's going to have great success, because I continue to say it, even during a down year this past season, he was still the Rangers' second leading goal scorer in 5-on-5 play. The only player that was better than him was Artemi Panarin, so that says something. Not only that, but at even strength, Lafreniere had more goals, I said it here a couple videos ago and you were shocked about this, than Austin Matthews, Alex Ovechkin, who we just alluded to, and not only that, but Sam Reinhart on the back-to-back Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. So that is also something to be said there. Utilize him on the power play. They have to do it. I believe that's how you get the best out of Lafreniere.
Definitely. And there's a lot of young players who bring up great points about Gabe Perreault. I think that he's got to rise above the rest of the crop to kind of make the team. And I think it's fine if he doesn't, right? He's going to continue his development. Bret, I'm really excited for. And Lafreniere, you bring up great points about Lafreniere. He was not utilized on the power play properly last year. Chris Kreider, for some reason, even being injured, was played over him on the power play. Couldn't understand that one. But now I think with that opening, and Mike Sullivan coming in, I think that he is going to utilize him in that spot on the power play, and I think the Rangers are going to be a better team for it. And I do think that Lafreniere, he's going to be unlocked a little bit. We're going to have another video on that as well, Lafreniere heading into this year, but he's going to be unlocked a bit by Mike Sullivan because, you know, you bring up Gensel as well. Gensel kind of came out of nowhere for the Pittsburgh Penguins, young player, and Mike Sullivan put trust in him, put him in situations to succeed, and I feel like he'll do the same thing with Alexi Lafreniere. And not only do I feel like he'll do that, I feel like they have to do that because he just got that payday. It's just starting now. It's just kicking in now, that new contract. He's got to put up a lot of points. But we want to hear what you have to say about everything we covered in this video down below in the comments, because the conversation always continues in the comments. You can find us on X. The link is in the description. And we will see you for another video very soon, because there's a lot to talk about with the Rangers heading into the next year. So let us know how you feel. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.